we're going to hop into the demonstration. So hopefully everybody's still awake after getting hit with the PowerPoint. So let's hop into this. All right. So where I am right now is in FormIt. There we go, screen fresh. Now, for those of you who haven't seen this before, this is actually FormIt 360 on the desktop. So you can have access to this with the Pro account. I could be doing most of the things I'm doing online in the browser one. I'm using the desktop partially to lighten the load on the GoToWebinar. But from in here, if you've never seen this before, it's very similar to SketchUp in the sketching side. I can always come out here and draw my shapes. I can then do push-pull. I can grab the elements, push that back, if need be, or if I want to, I can actually just draw on the surface and push-pull that too. So very easy to model things, very easy to work with things. Now, one of the other benefits of this is that, again, I can take advantage of different components or groups. And some of the ones I'm looking at here are samples that you can actually download for free from the FormIt website. So if I'm looking to use FormIt not as an overall massing, but I want to actually use this to do layout. So I can come over here and say, okay, well, this is going to be a circulation object. That's going to be a conference room. And that's going to be an office. And then from here, what I can do is actually just start doing push and pull and stretching and copying these around to actually lay out what my space is going to look like. And I can treat these either as a group, in which case, if I make a change to one, it updates multiple. Or I can ungroup these or actually make them unique. So now when I make a change to this one, it only affects that one. Again, if you've used SketchUp before, a lot of this is going to be very similar. What a lot of people don't realize is how easy this is to work with. And I can save this content on the cloud if I want, and make it available for all the different users of my project. Okay. So I'm going to hop out of this and into something more interesting, hopefully. So let's say what I'm doing is I'm working on a basic object. So got my model here, got some contents or groups. I've actually created a few levels. So again, if you're familiar with Revit, you can create levels in there. Levels here work the exact same way. And what I've done is I've created an object and told it that I'd like it to actually use those levels. Now, those levels are going to come into play in a couple of minutes when I actually bring this over to Insight for some analysis. I do have a couple of groups in here for sunshade. I can modify my visual style depending on how I'd like this to look. If I want this to be a little bit sketchier, or if I want this to be a little bit more hard edge. I can save different scenes so it looks a certain way and from a different direction. And I can actually create different layers and turn things on or off, like I just did with that shading device. So pretty basic, but still has a lot of features, a lot of tools. And I can bring in materials from just about anywhere. Again, because it's actually part of the Autodesk workflow. If that material exists in the library, I can bring it in, or I can create a brand new one that uses it. Now, one of the cool things with this is that if I have a couple of people that I want to talk to about this project, what I can actually do is bring those other users into this by sharing it. So you see here I have the ability to share. I can invite other people to this. What I currently actually have is another user here on an iPad. And I can tell myself that I'd like to follow their camera, so I can actually see what it is that they're working on. So if they have questions, they can ask me right away, and I know exactly what it is that they're focused on. So if that person selects an object, you can notice how this just got darkened, and that gets pulled out. Multiple people can actually work on this file at the same time. So similar to how you have work sharing in Revit, I can have a few people here either just looking at elements or actively working together. And now I can unfollow the camera and take control of what I'm looking at again. And we have a little chat window here that we can talk back and forth with each other and go over concepts, ideas, or explain what we're working on. Now, from there, let's say I want to actually get a little bit more into my project. I'd like to talk about how this is looking. So So I've made a couple of forms here, but how is this actually going to react? Well, the easiest thing that you can always do is to say I want to put my shadows on and see what happens throughout the day. But if I do have the Pro version, I can start to get a little bit more information on this, a little bit more intelligence. I can actually tell it that I want to do a solar analysis. Let's try one more time. There we go. And what I'm doing is I'm actually selecting different surfaces. So all these surfaces that I'm picking are surfaces that I'm interested in finding out how they are with the solar, sorry, with the solar analysis. There we go. And right now it's being set for a month peak. I can choose which month I care about, and it actually runs through and changes it. And you can start to see how different elements affect it. So I add that, tell it to reanalyze it. I can actually see what kind of a range that overhang does. So if there's certain elements that I know I need to get more coverage there for certain months, I can make that larger and just very quickly see the difference. This is a nice way to analyze. It's also a very quick one. But if what I'd like to do is actually do the insight, this will give me a lot more information from sort of a heating and cooling loop, not just the solar radiation. So I'm actually going to go and view that insight. And this is the insight that was actually generated from that file in FormIt. So we started off, we're laying out our design. We've worked and collaborated with a couple of different designers through the web. And now I want to see, well, what kind of energy use are we looking at with this building? Does it meet with the overall goals that we started with? So from here I can scroll down a little bit and see, okay, well, we're not at Architecture 2030 yet, so let's take a look at things. Which month I care about, and it actually runs through and changes it. And you can start to see how different elements affect it. So I add that, tell it to reanalyze it. I can actually see what kind of a range that overhang does. So if there's certain elements that I know I need to get more coverage there for certain months, I can make that larger and just very quickly see the difference. Now, this is a nice way to analyze. It's also a very quick one. But if what I'd like to do is actually do the insight, this will give me a lot more information from sort of a heating and cooling loop, not just the solar radiation. So I'm actually going to go and view that insight. And this is the insight that was actually generated from that file in FormIt. So we started off, we're laying out our design. We've worked and collaborated with a couple of different designers through the web. And now I want to see, well, what kind of energy use are we looking at with this building? Does it meet with the overall goals that we started with? So from here I can scroll down a little bit and see, okay, well, we're not at Architecture 2030 yet, so let's take a look at things. So let me pick on my HVAC unit. So what this actually shows me is the mean data, and I have different kinds of choices for HVAC types. So if I say, well, we're definitely not going with those two, but I'm not sure which one we're going to go with yet. So it's somewhere in between here. That'll give me an average of those choices. And I'll see the change on top. And then that change will actually adjust the rest of the process. I can modify the operating schedule. So let's say this place is actually not 24/7. It's only open during the week or a work week. And as each thing I change, I can always go back and explain, okay, that's just the typical hours. That's how it's impacting here. I can continue to go through here and see how that actually impacts my project. And each one of these gives me a little explanation of what it is I'm actually looking at, how it actually impacts the building, and then I can run through and modify this. If I know I want to have some daylighting controls, click on that. With some basic changes, I can actually see how I'm actually impacting this. And if what I want to do is actually run through different options, I can add that scenario. So I've just saved essentially a bookmark of this layout. So if I want to refer to this and say, okay, well, we could either go in this direction or let's look at a few other ones. You know, what happens if we change the glazing to something different and we look at a lot of different coverage for the operating schedule? Okay, well, let's save a bookmark of that. So not only am I looking at the history of this file, but I can also save those and quickly return back to them. And this little graphic up here gives me a little bit more information too. I can say, show me the basic heating loads. And also the cooling loads. And this is a lot of information with me having to do very little actual effort or work. I basically drew an outline like I would in SketchUp, pulled it up, told it where in the world this was, and shows a weather station that's nearby this process, and told it, okay, well, these are what my floor-to-floor heights are. What's the actual use case of this building? Where am I so far? So I can start to make some decisions and start to figure out how I want to actually work with this. So from there, I might go back and iterate a little bit. I might look at some of the objects here and start to array these or copy them. Say that I want to have 4 of those. And just lay things out. And the nice thing about this is I can get as detailed as I want with FormIt, or I can keep it as basic. If I don't want to be looking at this as forms, and I want this to actually look at it from a standpoint of, you know, walls, one of the tools it has is the ability to actually create a shell. There we go. Now I've just got walls. And I can actually snap to the lines in there and create my floors if I want to turn this into a real sort of building to bring over. Now, the other cool thing about this is that if that's kind of what I want to do, my goal here is to bring this into Revit so I can continue to develop my work. Again, I'm trying to save time in the process. One of the things that I can actually do is go into a little bit more detail here. I can create these groups, but what I want to actually do with these groups is make sure that I'm giving them a name and assigning them to the correct category. The benefit of this is when I bring this back into Revit, I can actually schedule that. I can change that, and I can use that essentially as a placeholder. So if I know I'm going to get more details later, I'll just put an object in there and leave it somewhat basic, and then change it to the real thing when it actually gets into Revit. Now, the other thing I mentioned was Dynamo. So let's say I'm still in FormIt, and I want to start to do some things that are a little bit more functional or just a little bit more complex. So I'll look at one of the Dynamo scripts that I've actually brought in here. This is another example that Autodesk has posted for free. And that's basically a storefront system generator. So let's say that I know this is going to be using the storefront. Drop that little guy in there. That looks pretty basic, kind of like a block or a group essentially. But the nice thing about this is once I actually go into it, I now have all of these other options. All these little sliders, things that I can actually change. Do I want this to be a little taller? Or a little shorter in that case. Let me modify that a bit. There we go. Do I want the spacing to be different, the depth to be different? I can make those changes, and then while it thinks about it and works on it, I can continue to work on other things. So again, it's a scripting engine. Basically, it has all the information required to build this. I drop in the beginning portion, and then I can modify this as I see fit. So I can start off very quickly in here and lay things out.